I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 58. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hi guys, welcome to this week's episode. So glad you're here. I'm excited to talk about today. The topic is being taught versus learning. Two different things. And so we're going to go into that a little bit. And I really want you to think through where you see yourself, what light you see yourself in. And it's probably going to vary from area to area in your own life or in your own firm. But just keep an open mind and see what pops up for you during this episode, because just the awareness of what we're talking about today will shift something. It will kind of put you into a different mode. So I'm excited to go into it. And I should let you all know before we dig in, the October sprint that we are hosting, it's a 30-day sprint. The doors are open and they're about to be closed. And it really is going to depend on how fast we fill this. We do have a certain amount of capacity that we can handle, and we are stretching that. So the reason I'm not telling you the number is because I'm trying to figure out what is the capacity we can actually handle and be as effective as possible. And I'm not willing to dip into, I don't know, let's try this and see if it's still effective. So we really are keeping it tight and small, and for that reason, so that it's as effective as possible for you, and you get the attention that is meant to be given in these 30-day sprints. You can head over to velocitywork.com/mastery and check it out if you're interested. But basically, just be prepared to get more done in October than you've gotten done in a long time. And we've done some podcast episodes in the past where the clients who had been through it shared their experiences. But we're just adding more and more value to these. And I'm proud of this. This is where my team's energy is really going on a daily basis, is how to provide more value to the participants of these sprints. And so I think you'd be really pleased. Also, last week we talked about the accountability chart. So that if you join the October sprint, there's a workshop for those participants about how to build your accountability chart. And you walk away with a draft, maybe 2 drafts of your own accountability chart for your firm. So there's all kinds of cool things that we're doing. It's not just accountability and getting more done. It's making sure you are showing up in a new and better way in how you operate in terms of productivity and managing your time, and also making headway on big things that have been put off for a while. It's just a cool thing. It's so cool. You should just go check out the page, velocitywork.com/mastery. We'd love to have you and work with you and get things done. Also, it's the last one we're doing of 2020. We only are going to be in the future. We just started these in June. In the future, in 2021, we're going to be doing 6 of them total. So it's not every month. They're strategically placed throughout the year. And the reason that we're doing one in October is because it is the first month of the last quarter. And it's the beginning of the last quarter. So it's a good time to kick it into gear for yourself so that you're not just stressing and struggling through the holidays trying to tie up loose ends. Like, get a head start on things so that you can end up where you want to end up, and use this program to do that. It's a pretty cool way to do so. So it's the last one of the year. So I can't wait to see who I get to work with this time. Okay, let's dig into today's topic. This is something that I'm super familiar with because as a teacher or an instructor or, a coach, when I'm leading a live class or a workshop, whenever I'm working with someone, it's very clear to me if they are engaged in the learning or not. And we can probably all recall moments where we haven't been as leaning in to what we're learning. We aren't sitting up straight, leaning in, really taking it in so that we can process it and do something with it. So there's this difference between I can feel as the instructor, but I've also been on the other side where I've felt this for myself as a student where I'm trying to learn, is if I am just being taught versus if I am learning. Being taught is very passive and learning is more active. Now there's different kinds of learning. There's some kinds of learning that are more passive than others, but being taught, it's when I close my eyes and I visualize a teacher and a student, and someone says that student is just being taught, then in my mind, that student is sort of leaning back in their chair, feet kicked up, kind of listening, kind of not, messing with something in front of them, like just half into it, And so that's like you're being taught. And it's almost this weird, if you're choosing to sit there, right? So I'm not talking about school and high school. This applies to that too. But as an adult, when we seek information, if you just lay back and are just waiting to be taught, like there's some epiphany that you're just waiting for them to say that's going to fix everything. And it's just a very disengaged way of consuming material. So that is where, and I see it all the time. So I'm not saying, it's funny because I imagine that there are people listening to this, like, who does that? But I don't know. I mean, I think there's times where I do, where I kind of doubt, like, it's almost like you can feel the doubt. It's like, I paid for this thing. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I don't do this that often, but I'm positive. I can't think of a specific example right now, but we all have done this at some point where you pay and you're kind of skeptical and you're like waiting for the instructor to share with you something that's going to be life-changing. And if they don't, then you kind of walk out and you're like, like you're just being taught, but you weren't learning. And so it's important to make this distinction between being taught and learning, because as we talk more about learning, then you'll be able to see where maybe you fall on the spectrum within different aspects of your life or different aspects of your firm and all of that. Learning, you can break up learning into two categories. One is passive learning and one is experiential learning. And that's much more active. That's the most active form of learning that you can have. So let's talk about passive learning first. Passive learning, there's an intent to learn for sure, but it is consumption. So reading a book is passive learning. Listening to a class is passive learning. So it's almost like you're taking in information. This is what I also refer to in other podcasts as inputs. So you're allowing inputs and with the intention of learning. So it's a passive learning. The thing with passive learning, passive learning is important. Like I think reading is important. I love certain podcasts I learn so much from. So it's important, but it can't stop there. You can't just listen to it and turn it off and it just rolls around in your head and that's it. Because if that's what happens, it's useless. You just wasted your time. You really indulged in this, like, I'm learning. I'm learning. But if you don't actually put it into action, it's just wasted. So passive learning is important, but it can't stop there. You have to put it into action. This is where you take it into the real world and you experiment with it and you have experience with the learning. And that is experiential learning. An easy way, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, an easy way to differentiate it is to think about learning how to swim. So you got to learn it, right? If you can read a book on how to swim, but you're not going to be able to swim until you get your butt in the pool. That's what it's going to take. So once you get in the pool, then you can actually apply what you've learned and fail and get water up your nose and figure it out. And it's all good. It ends up all good, right? But it's that you couldn't have done that without getting in the pool. So the experiential learning is where the magic happens. So that is where you want to make sure that you're taking the passive learning that you do, and it's important to have that, but it's useless. It's a waste of time if you don't practice it, if you don't put it into action. It's like, passive learning or consuming or having these inputs, that does not create results. You want to create results, you got to go apply it. You got to go implement it. find your way with it, find your groove with it, figure out, the best way to really utilize that knowledge. And that's the difference. What's cool about the sprints, the 30-day sprints I've been running, essentially, like if I had to recap it in a very easy way to understand, the participants are actually putting into action things that they have learned. It's experiential learning for 30 straight days with accountability. You can't beat that. The kind of learning that they're getting out of this is unbelievable. It starts to transform them into a new way of operating, into a new way of being that just, it produces results. They start cranking out results because they're actually implementing what they've learned into their own world, into their own life, into their own firms. That's magic. And I'm not taking credit for it. Like, yes, I provide the space for them, but they do the work. And yes, there's accountability, but they do the work. And it's hard work. It's like you're in the trenches and it's not a cakewalk. And, just like we're talking about jumping into a pool for the first time, you read how to swim, you get it in your head, but you haven't actually done it. So that's what they're doing. They are all in the pool. And, and they're never going to be the same because of it, because they are doing the work to implement the things that they have learned. So it's pretty remarkable to witness the difference between being taught, which I see that all the time. People who just lay back, it's almost like, show me, teacher, that there's something that I'm going to be able to take away. Like with that attitude, forget it. Like just don't even waste your time. If you don't have the attitude of like leaning into the learning, and when I say leaning in, really, when you think of someone who is receiving information, when you see them kicked back with their feet up, there's always an exception to the rule, but typically that person is just kind of being entertained, right? When you see someone who is learning, they sit up straighter, they're more leaned forward, their eyes are focused in, their ears are like listening, really listening. And that is different. So I'm bringing this up because I think it's really important for each of us, myself included, to keep our eyes open for where we are just being taught. Where are we allowing that to happen? And what that means is you don't need to beat yourself up for not being leaning into the learning, but ask yourself why. Is it something you're really not interested in? You feel like you should be, so you showed up for this thing and to learn information, but you really are not interested in it. Okay, well, but I'm telling you, you're wasting your time with it because you are just so laid back and there isn't actual learning happening. Then it is a waste of your time, which is a waste of money. So all around, it's just a waste. So start tuning into when you really don't want to go do these things. Don't do them. Lean into the things you do want to do and focus there when it comes to learning. And then the other thing is take a look at what are you learning? What podcasts are you listening to? What classes are you taking? What groups are you a member of where you are at attention during those things? Because that's kind of cool. Give yourself some credit for that. You are leaning in, you are really learning. But the other thing about that is that this is an indicator of what you are really, what lights you up, what you're interested in. And if you're interested in it and you're leaned in and learning hard, then you're probably going to excel when it comes to implementing it. And so look for those hints. If you're, if you're skeptical, you're sitting back, you paid money, you feel like you should for some reason, or you want someone to prove something to you, it's like, you're wasting everybody's time. Get out of there. Instead, go put your money and your effort and your time and your energy into things that you want to lean into, you want to learn, and you want to implement. And then once you consume that information, you receive the input, you receive the learning, the passive learning, then your job is to go implement the learning, take action into the world with what you learned. And that is the thing that creates results. And I think so often we get caught up in passive learning and it never translates into experiential learning because we're busy. I mean, truthfully, that's an excuse. And we all know that, right? It is a real thing that you have a lot on your plate, but we all got the same 24 hours in a day. And some of y'all are crushing it. Some of you all are like really implementing hardcore what you learn. You're not willing to continue to learn without implementation. And some of you will just keep learning new things. And then all the ideas you have it's like the fire gets put out because you learn something new and you kind of forget about the other thing. And then you learn something new and it's like the new shiny object. And if you just learn something that feels really important, you lean into it and you really want to, you're interested in seeing it through, and then go see it through and then learn the next thing and then go see it through. You know, it's not always a perfect science like that, but if you can tend to have that principle for yourself, you will make headway so much more quickly because you won't be just darting from one thing to the next in terms of passive learning. And when you dart from one thing to the next, it really makes it nearly impossible to actually have experiential learning follow up from the passive learning. So it's something to really consider. Where are you being a passive learner? And look at those things and decide like, okay, I learned that. So now my job is to, like, I spent, 2 hours consuming. I need to sit down and spend some time thinking about how I'm going to get that implemented into my world. And when you do that, when you take the space, and it doesn't have to be long, it could be 10 to 15 minutes to think about, okay, these are all the things I learned. How do I want that to look inside my firm? How do I want that to look for myself? And start to sketch out some things, and you'll start to create a bit of a high level plan for yourself. And from there, you can take it deeper. You can create a more detailed plan, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a pretty eye-opening thing when you start to look at your consumption and your learning in this way. You start to pinpoint where there's room for improvement and go from there. I will say too, the experiential learning, there is nothing like it. I think consumption or passive learning is really important too, but oh my gosh, you guys, it's hard. I used to have a coach that would tell me, you got to be willing to suck at it. Like, you've learned how to do this thing. Now go in the world and do your thing, and you're going to fall on your face and you're going to mess it up and it's not going to be right. And then you're going to get back up and you're going to do it again. So it's kind of like the swimming thing we were talking about before, but I loved the way she put that. Just, you got to be willing to suck at it. And so many people want to do it right. They want to do it perfectly out of the gates. It's just not going to go that way. So the sooner you can accept that, the easier it is to begin to implement what you learn, because you're not so attached to perfection. You're more just attached to getting through the part where you're going to suck at it so that you can become really exceptional with it. I hope this gave you some good food for thought. And yeah, we've been in the business this last 6 months of really fostering experiential learning. And I've got to witness some pretty cool things, some pretty cool efforts and results being created because people are like actually doing it, implementing. It's pretty great. All right, everyone, I will see you back here next Tuesday. Hi guys, it's me again. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, you probably understand that growth requires results, not just staying active. If you want to learn how to build your days around getting results, I'll show you how in this zero fluff class that I teach. Go to velocitywork.com/results for registration information. I cannot wait to see you there. If you want to hang out with us on social, come on over to Instagram. Our handle is velocity.work. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/meetvelocitywork. Cheers, my friends, to real growth and a great life. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.